Today on the History Channel, we have an exclusive documentary. American President. Was Ronald Reagan actually a successful U.S. president? Or has the media been lying to you? This groundbreaking documentary has shaken the country, featuring field investigator and history specialist Sabrina Sojit with the foreign policy expert Blake Rizal, Berkeley undergrad Bjorn Brigida, and President Ronald Reagan himself. Reagan's administration was a controversial one, and the American public has had a diverse opinions on the policies and legislation of the time. Sojit's documentary hopes to address some of the criticisms about Reagan's administrations and clarify questions posed during his time in office. Now let's get right into it.
Hi, I'm Sabrina Sojit, and my goal with this film is to provide insight to who Ronald Reagan really was. In order to get to the bottom of this mystery, I decided to meet with and interview many different experts on the Reagan administration to get a well-rounded idea of his presidency. Our first stop on the path to the truth is the trilingual foreign policy expert, Balak Hussein. Thank you for being here, Balak. Now, Reagan is known to have a few slip-ups in his foreign policy. Can you tell us a little about them?
In 1983, he sent American troops to Lebanon to keep peace after the recently U.S.-brokered peace between the Israeli government and the Palestine Liberation Organization through the implementation of the multinational force. However, the MNF ended up acting as a belligerent to the subsequent civil war. In 1986, the air attacks on Libya in response to alleged terrorist bombing was approved by Reagan. This most infamous foreign affair, however, is the Iran-Contra affair. Ronald Reagan involved the United States in many foreign affairs. He was very anti-communist. In 1983, he even called the Soviet Union the evil empire. He did, however, work with President Gorbachev of the Soviet Union to de-escalate tensions and end the Cold War. I even have someone from Soviet Russia here with me to explain their opinion on Reagan.
Большевик, Достоевский, Кремлин, Сталинград, Калашников, Бабушка Чайковский, Menshevik Soviet, death to capitalism.
Tell me more about the Iran-Contra affair. How did it reflect on Reagan?
Basically, Reagan wanted to help the Contras overthrow the communist government in Nicaragua. However, the Bolton Agreement prevented this. Reagan went around Congress to supply arms to the Contras in Nicaragua, which was discovered by the communist government and exposed to the world. This really damaged Reagan's credibility and reputation.
How about in the Middle East?
Oh boy. Well, to undermine Soviet control of Afghanistan, Reagan's administration funded a program called Operation Cyclone, which funded the Mujahideen to overthrow the government. However, in part, this helped to create the militant Islamic organization Al-Qaeda that we all know today. U.S. intervention in Iraq also created another faction of Al-Qaeda in Iraq, which eventually ISIS sprang up from. So basically, Reagan created ISIS.
Okay, I think we have enough on Reagan's foreign policy. Thank you, Balak.
Okay, so now that we know about Reagan's foreign policies, let's assess the pros and cons. Pro. Reagan helped to end the Cold War by outspending the Soviets. Con. His affairs in the Middle East left them in chaos and helped create militant organizations such as Al-Qaeda. Con. He made the United States look bad by aiding the Contras to overthrow the Sandinista government, in direct violation of the Bolton Amendment. It looks like many of his foreign policies were failures, but I still wasn't convinced. Next, while I was on my way to lunch in Berkeley, I decided to interview a student I saw on the campus for more insight.
Yeah, I'm Bjorn Brigida. I'm a student here at UC Berkeley, but I'm originally from Scandinavia.
What is your opinion on Reagan's economic policy, or Reaganomics?
Well, seeing as the national deficit almost tripled during his administration, I'd say his economic policy was a flat-out failure. His whole policy was based on the theory of supply-side economics, which is basically corporate tax cuts in order to increase corporate revenue, which in turn gives companies more money to hire workers with and gives the rich more tax cuts than the poor. It was also believed that income taxes would provide workers more of an incentive to work, which in turn will increase the supply of labor. In theory, the economic growth would expand the tax base. The added government revenue would replace the amount lost from the tax cuts. This may have sounded like a good idea at the time, but investment needed to help spur the economy lacked in the year when supply-side economy was in place, whereas in the time periods where it was implemented, investment growth grew much more rapidly. Therefore, his economic policy failed.
Can you elaborate on why you think Reaganomics was ineffective?
First of all, the top income tax rate was 28%, and people who made less than a certain amount paid no taxes at all. Reagan offset these tax cuts with tax increases elsewhere, but did not cut Social Security or Medicare payments. He also triggered the recession of 1981 to 1982, which led to an increase in unemployment to 10.8% and stayed above 10% for 10 months.
Wow, Bjorn, thanks for the input. Now we need someone to compare him to further understand his thought processes. Is there a former or modern president you would relate Reagan to, and why?
I would compare Reagan to Eisenhower. They had some similar ideas on economic policy. They both wanted to cut government spending as much as possible, although Eisenhower did a way better job. They also both wanted to expand free trade. For example, in 1985, Reagan vetoed a bill on proposed import tariffs on textile goods. Similarly, Eisenhower pushed for the extension of the Reciprocal Tariff Act, which authorized the president to negotiate with foreign nations to reduce tariffs in return for reciprocal reductions in tariffs in the United States.
Great, Bjorn. Good luck in your protest.
I hate Antonin Scalia.
Alright, so we now understand some effects and aspects of Reagan's economic policy of Reaganomics. He triggered a recession, was supportive of free trade, supply-side economics theory was implemented, and investment growth overall slowed. It seemed pretty split, so I decided to collect a different opinion.
This message is approved by Ronald Reagan. By the way, ended the Cold War.
Mr. President, it's nice to see you again.
Oh, it's nice to see you again too, Sabrina. It's good to see you.
So as you know, we are creating a documentary about you and your presidency and if it was a success or a failure. Would you say, what were your greatest accomplishments during your administration?
Well, I would say that the intermediate range nuclear forces theory of 1987 was a huge accomplishment. I'd say it was pretty important since I eliminated all short-range nuclear weapons and conventional missiles, as well as their launches in the US and Soviet Union. It was an important move in ending the Cold War, which I also did, by the way. It also created 200 million jobs during my administration, by the way.
Sounds like you did a lot. If you had to rank yourself among all of the US presidents, where do you think you would fall, and why?
Well, I think I'd be number one. Not only am I a movie star, but I'm passionate and compassionate. I met and communicated with various Soviet leaders over the years, putting aside our differences for the good of the world. For example, at the Reykjavik summit with Mikhail Gorbachev, which was a prerequisite to the INF Treaty, I made great progress in international relations. Although it ended angrily, I made a personal connection with Gorbachev, which was important for later peace negotiations. Honestly, I'd say my legacy is ending the Cold War. People are no longer living in fear because of me, and it's a long-standing impact that eliminated decades of fear. And by the way, I ended the Cold War.
Okay, thanks, Mr. President.
You're welcome. What's your name again?
I'm Fabrina.
Oh, Fabrina. Nice to see you.
You're swell, sir.
Thank you.
Well, we found out that Reagan thought very highly of his administration. However, we did collect some important insight. Let's assess his successes. Pro. Reagan was a successful actor before his presidency. Pro. He established a personal connection with Mikhail Gorbachev in the Reykjavik summit. Pro. He signed the INF Treaty in 1987. While he was successful in ending the Cold War, I think that the evidence points to more failures than successes with Reagan's administration. The Iran-Contra affair damaged his credibility, and intervention in the Middle East resulted in the creation of Al-Qaeda. His economic policy tripled the national deficit. Overall, Reagan's administration was mostly a failure.
Well, there you have it. The answer to the question the American public has been distraught over for years. The Reagan administration will now go down in history as mostly a failed presidency, but it certainly won't be the biggest failure.